Hence, however one defines consciousness, they must first acknowledge that every shred of evidence has so far supported the statement that consciousness is a product of the mind, which in turn is a product of the brain. There's absolutely no evidence to suggest that our consciousness is independent of our bodies. None.
Okay. Yeah, that's
With that
another.
said,
Is this true, Kyle?
let's get
Yeah,
on.
that's wrong. I mean, it depends on what you mean by evidence, right? There may not be great evidence, right? But there's certainly evidence, right? I mean, there's near-death experiences, there's psychedelic drugs that people take that will decrease your brain activity, but then increase your conscious experiences. I mean, it may not be great evidence, right? But it's still evidence, right? So I think it needs. If he's going to say that there's absolutely no like good evidence, well, maybe, right? But if you're saying there's no evidence at all, well, that seems kind of weird. I mean, there is evidence, right? Just like I would say that there's evidence for naturalism, right? Even though I'm not a naturalist, there is evidence for naturalism, right? I'm not going to say there's absolutely no evidence for naturalism, right? There's always going to be some evidence for naturalism because all that evidence requires, the definition of evidence is that which makes a hypothesis more likely, right? So near-death experiences would be evidence. Psychedelic drugs would be evidence, right? It may not be great evidence, but it's still evidence. So that's another issue I want to point out here. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because like sometimes I feel like in like a lot of like more like popular level atheist videos, they want to like have this very restrictive view of like what counts as evidence. It seems like to go against the idea of free thinking and critical thinking and following the evidence wherever it leads. When we put evidence into this like little box of only this counts as what would be like evidence.
Yeah, another thing I want to point out here is to suggest our consciousness is independent of our bodies. I'm not really sure what he means by that. I mean, because as an idealist like myself, I would say that it's the mind. Sorry, not the mind. It's the body that's in the mind, not the other way around. So I wouldn't say that like there's this immaterial mental stuff that floats in my head, and then when I die, it just leaves. No, it's not. It's not how it works, right? Because the body itself is part of the mental environment. So if everything's mental, right, then even my body would itself be part of that mental environment. So this whole idea, so consciousness cannot be independent of our bodies. There's nothing independent from consciousness. So I would just reject that whole like distinction between the body and consciousness because on my view of idealism, there is no distinction between those, right? They're all part of one system. They're all, one ontology, right? So that's another thing I want to point out. But